Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Joe on Joe. That's right. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. And we're back for another exciting, thrilling episode of Joe and Joe, the podcast where we look at each issue of J. Joe, Real American Hero in excruciating details. We go page by page, panel by panel. We break stuff down, talk about the history of the comic book, talk about the history at the time the comic book was published. Anything that I know about this comic book, I will share with you. That's my promise to you. Doesn't mean I'm going to know everything. But it's pretty sure that when it's done, I'm going to have nothing more to say about this comic book. And today is G.I. Joe 141. I'm sorry, G.I. Joe starring Snake Eyes and the Transformers Robots in Disguise Generation 2, number 141. It's exciting. I actually enjoyed this issue quite a bit. I am enjoying this Transformers crossover. I think it's a cool change of pace, and it's also an opportunity for the book to get back to some mission-based action, which I'm really a big fan of. And we've got a couple guest star artists this week that are pinch hitting, who I'm big fans of their work. So I was excited to see that. I didn't remember them being on this book, and when I saw it, I was quite enthused because I'm a fan of both of their works, both at the time and then currently for one of them. Well, I mean, I like them both. No offense, but anyway, we'll get to that. So, without any ado, I want to thank you all for being a fan and listening to the show and following me on various social medias at Joe on Joe Pod. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com, like our friend Scotty Cameron does. It keeps me updated. I appreciate that, Scotty. I really do. I love hearing from listeners. It's the reward that podcasters get, is hearing from you guys and seeing that you listen to the show and you like it, and feedback is great. And I love starting the conversations, especially a show like this where it's me solo. And while you're on the internet, you can check me out on patreon.com. We've got a couple new Patreons on there. Thank you guys so much for joining. I don't have see, the thing with my Patreon is I actually don't have a disclaimer on there saying that I can or want to mention you on the pod. So I don't know. I don't have people's permission to say, hey, thanks, Bill, or thanks, blankety blank. So I'll go back and I'll update that, because I should do that, because I know a lot of people like hearing their names on it, but I know that some people don't. So that's why I don't do a lot of Patreon mentions, like shout out to this person for joining, because I don't know that they're cool with it. So, I'm all about consent is what I'm saying. But you can check it out. Patreon.com/JoeandJoePod. You get access to the entire library, more than just is on the free feed. It's everything we've ever done with the cartoon episodes, but also it's all of the Joe and Joe Illustrated episodes. The first 50 or so are Patreon only, and then we started doing them for the regular feed. So you can really you can literally go through every 140 issues of my thoughts on this subject. That is 140 hours. That is, what is that? It is 5 days worth of content that you're never going to get back again. But I appreciate each and every one of you. And while you are on the internet rating and reviewing and doing all those things, please check out our great sponsor, the Movies in a Meal podcast. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. Speaking of being online, I hope all of you, or some of you, or any of you, joined us at the FanCon XR online comic book convention last week. It was in virtual reality, and it was pretty cool. I was there. I was not repping G.I. Joe in my avatar or in my name. So if you guys were there and I missed you, I apologize. I was there kind of working as a social media fly on the wall. So getting a lot of screenshots and stuff and things like that. But it was neat. There was mention of G.I. Joe, and I didn't even prompt that. So maybe it did come from some Joe fan out there, some listener. If you guys were the ones that asked this question, please speak up, because it seemingly came out of the blue. It was on the Archie panel, and Archie is known for more recently known for doing a lot of crazy crossovers, like Archie versus Sharknado, Archie versus the Predator. Go back in the day, they did Archie versus Punisher, things like that. And someone asked the question, someone wanted Ryan to ask the question of, would Archie consider a G.I. Joe crossover? I promise you, I did not ask that question, but boy, did I get excited about that question. So they said they have people on staff who would love to do that, but then they laughed and said most likely Jughead would be ripping Cobra Commander's mask off right away, and so they'd run into some problems. But I think it was a nice bug to plant in their ear, so you never know where Archie is going to cross over next. But that was nice. So hopefully that did come from a Joe and Joe listener who joined us. But it was neat. It was a very cool program. It was, it was VR. It was like Second Life. Like I didn't have a VR headset, so it was like being Second Life, or being in like the old PlayStation Home, where you're an avatar running around talking to strangers. So if you didn't have the VR set, that's what it was like. If you had the VR set, it was probably pretty immersive. It was probably pretty neat. But it was cool because you got access to some great names. Golden Apple really worked hard to get some really good names. People like Garth Ennis, Christopher Priest, both of whom I have nothing but fond things to say about their work. And then there was a lot of really great talented people, but names that may not be household names yet. Blake Northcott, David Pepose, Shannon Watts. This is off the top of my head, so I apologize. Jerry Duggan, who you should know by now. He's been writing X-Men for a while, and he's a great dude. George Romero Jr. was there. So George Romero's the senior zombie guy, his son, who also does horror movies, and he is just a general dude. He was there talking about all his ventures with heavy metal. There were a lot of great dudes from heavy metal. Brennan Columbus was there. Steve Orlando joined us. Steve Orlando's been doing a ton of great work. Let me think. This is all off the top of my head, so I apologize if I'm missing anybody, but it was great. It was a really good time. And we had a lot of panels. It was a long day. It was 12 hours. It was 10 to 10, and it was good. So I don't know what's in store for the future of FanCon, but I wish them well, and I look forward to seeing what they have next in the hopper. When I hear about it, I'll be certain to let you guys know about it. So let's go on to G.I. Joe, and let's talk.
You were saying?
Which, for you new listeners, is the segment of my show where I look at comic books that were on the shelf the same month as the issue of G.I. Joe that we're discussing. Today is G.I. Joe 141. That was cover dated October of 1993. So that means it was actually sitting on the stands during the month of August of 1993. So this is the month I personally was getting ready to go to college. I'm that old. I was probably I think it was like August. I think it was like August 15th. I hiked off to college. So this would have been my last issue of G.I. Joe that I bought before I was ruined at the University of Illinois. And it's a good issue to enjoy, but also it was a nice send-off issue. And then by September I would have found my although let me think about this. Because originally I had my comic shop, which would have been 10th Planet in Oak Lawn. I had them holding my books because University of Illinois was not that terribly far from my mom's house, from my going home. So I would have them hold my books for like a few months, and then I would come home and pick them up. So I don't know that I was getting my regular books from the comic shop on Green Street in Champaign. I know that I went there a lot, but I don't think I was getting my new comics from there. I think it took me a little while to shift and get my new comics set up as a regular sub at U of I. So this actually might not have been a quick transfer as far as ongoing stuff. I may have like picked up the next few issues when I went home for Thanksgiving or something like that. I know it took me a while. When I moved back home, I do remember this. When I moved back back to Chicago after post-grad, I still was shopping at 10th Planet. I was still shopping at my comic shop on the south side when I was living in the city. And that was like on Wednesdays, I would leave my job, which was, like near O'Hare Airport, if anyone knows Chicago. It's northwest suburbs. I would leave that job on Wednesdays, travel to the south side of Chicago, which is, not near. It was a haul. And I would go to my comic shop to buy my books. And then, pop in and see my parents on a Wednesday. And then I would drive back up north to the city. I did that for a good year, I think. Then eventually I was like, I need to find a comic book shop in the city. And I eventually had to let my 10th Planet go. But anyway, Tales of Comic Memories. So this segment is what we talk about, is books that were on the shelf. So we're going to start with DC Comics. Remember, last month was Superman Returns month. So this is now Superman is back, and he is in full mullet effect. Action Comics 692, Adventures of Superman 505, both highlighting Superman's mullet. It looks fantastic. Superman 82 and Man of Steel 26, those were the last two chapters of the whole death and return of Superman. And again, mullet, full effect. Although John Bogdanove shies away from highlighting the mullet on his cover on 26. I wonder if he drew that before he knew that Superman was going to have a full-fledged mullet. But Dan Jurgens does not shy away from it in Superman 82, which would have been the actual last issue of that whole arc, where Superman's kind of representational behind the other heroes that are flying forward. And it is a side profile view, and his mullet is rocking. That super mullet is a thing. That really is just a moment in time, everybody. It lasted for a long time too. For all you youngsters out there, it was not a flash in the pan. That mullet was stuck around for a few years. It is a thing. It is not a quick change. The other big book this month was Batman 500, which was Azrael's true ascension to the role of Batman. This is where he got his full As-Bats costume, where it was I actually think it was designed by Joe Quesada, if memory serves. But where it's a fully integrated Batman suit with Azrael trappings versus an Azrael suit that had Batman trappings, right? So it had this like metallic kind of V-shaped cowl, gold things. Joe Quesada is a fabulous artist. This is not a dig on his talent at all. But his designs work really well for his art style. And overall, like if he's like doing a fresh design on a character, for the most part, unless they're pretty basic character. But like, so him does, like when you first see the Azrael costume, it looks cool when Quesada draws it, but in a lot of other artists' hands, it looks real bulky. So I think the same thing kind of is happening here. So Kelly Jones has drawn the newsstand edition, or the direct market edition rather, or because there was a version of this that had a big black cover, I think. And the Kelly Jones version of it looks really awkward. But you look at the Quesada version, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I think Walter Simonson is another artist that's like that. And again, any excuse to talk about Walter Simonson, I'm going to take it. His designs for his character, for his costumes, for his original creations, or his updates are amazing when drawn by him. But a lot of times they're too intricate to really translate well to be drawn by almost anyone else, because they don't understand exactly how everything fits or how everything's supposed to work. They're working off of, especially with a new character, not a rich history of how that costume moves as interpreted by other artists. So a lot of times it can be a little too bulky or in places than you originally designed. I know we've talked about this before, but on the flip side of it, someone like Dave Cockrum, his and Gil Kane, their designs are real simple, but elegant and timeless. So when other artists come on board, it's hard to mess it up. but they're well matched. They're well put together. The lines are easy to tell we're in the right, they're in the right place and things like that. So, yeah, so that's my take on the Asbat costume, but it works great for what they were doing here, which is saying this is Batman 2.0. This is the tech, especially in the early 90s where it was computers are starting to come around. So like the future, what's the future going to be like? Is it going to be, are we all going to be phased out and replaced, that kind of thinking? So now you get a almost cybernetic looking Batman running around in this hyped up, super imagey looking costume. I think that works perfect for the storyline. Having said that, I don't like the costume, but I know some people do. I know some people have genuine, it has its genuine fans. I like it for its utility in the storytelling. I really do. But as a costume, it's hard on my eyes. That's this keen observer. What else do we got? Oh, the Bloodlines annuals are starting. That's fabulous. Let's see here. Is that the first? I'm not sure which is the very first one, but we've got Adventures of Superman annual. 15 has Bloodlines. So does Deathstroke annual 2. The Eclipso annual. I mean, all the annuals did, but this month is Green Arrow. Oh, I should mention Green Lantern 46. That's also a part of the Death of Superman. That's the big one. That's where Coast City gets destroyed. That came out this month as well. And that's where Green Lantern loses it. And in 47, 48, and 49 is where he, goes bonkers and, kills all the other members, steals the rings, things like that. Let's see. I thought that there was one 47. Yeah, I'm sorry. 48, 49, and 50. 47 was kind of a not fill-in issue, but kind of a quick reset issue. I thought there was something in between those. So in Green Lantern 47, which is next month, it's a kind of a recap to reset that. Let's remember that Green Lantern and Green Arrow are good friends, because Green Lantern is about to die. Hal Jordan, at the time, was about to die. So then they went into the whole Emerald Twilight storyline, things like that. But 46 was always a big one in the back issues. That was always like a book that sat at $10 when the rest of the Green Lanterns were $1 or $2. Hawkman annual number 1 was a Bloodline. I'm going to get all the Bloodlines up, and then I'm going to explain what Bloodlines was for those of you who don't know what the Bloodlines was. Yeah. So Bloodlines was a crossover where they introduced, it was for all the summer annuals that year, and they introduced these creatures who look like, I don't know how to describe them. They all look different, but they all looked like some kind of Mighty Morphin Power Ranger villain. And they showed up to Earth, and they fed on human spinal fluid. And so they would kill most of the humans they ate, right? They would go behind them, they would suck on their spine, and the people would die. But let's say 1 out of every 100 people that they attacked wouldn't die. They would actually gain superpowers. So this was DC's way of trying to introduce a new character in each annual. And there were a few that stuck around. I think there were a few last month that I don't remember talking about this last week, but we didn't. But like the guy that Jeff Loeb wrote, where he was like a purple version of the Hulk, came out of Bloodlines. Argent is in the Deathstroke. I believe his name's Argent. Is in the Deathstroke annual. He stuck around for a little bit. He had a weird costume. I think Damage came out of these. Did Damage come out of this? But the biggest one by far, what I'm leading up to, is Hitman. And that came out of the Demon annual. And Hitman is fabulous. I'm a huge fan of Hitman. I'm going back last month to see, did we get a Demon annual? No, it was not. There were some Bloodlines last month. Yeah, I don't remember mentioning it last week. But Hitman spun out of the Demon and is like an all-timer. It's just he's just an all-time character for me. Again, Garth Ennis, fabulous. If you've never read any Demon, yeah, this has been going on for a while. I feel like I've ignored these. If you've never read any Hitman books, do so. They're really, really great. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm having like a brain cramp. I don't know if I mentioned any Bloodlines before, but if I didn't, then here you go. There's your Bloodline mention.
You were saying?
I was. Thanks for keeping me on track, Stalker. So over at Marvel Comics in August of 1993, so much angst. Marvel Masterworks #1. So this was Masterworks was their first real effort at doing a hardcover library collecting the history of Marvel. Like the first, and it was 10 issues at a time. We've talked about this. They did the Spider-Man. So this is the Avengers one is out this month. I remember really being excited for it. Every time they do these, I get excited because I love seeing that stuff stay in print. And then I always say, I'm going to make this, Michael. I'm going to start reading these. And then I get a bunch and then I stop. I'm doing that with omnibuses these days. I'm getting a bunch of omnibuses, but I'm not stopping though. Like I'm actually completing them. So if I have the opportunity to. So like I just put together a run of like my FF omnibuses. I'm going to read them. I'm starting to read my X-Men omnibuses, things like that. I need for them to put the Uncanny Volume 2 back into print so I can grab that at a reasonable rate. But yeah, so the Masterworks was in print this month. They put out a trade paperback of a fabulous few issues of Captain America. It's the Deathlock Lives ones, and this is where Deathlock came into the Marvel Universe proper, because he was previously in, what was it, Amazing Adventures, and it was all future stuff. And it was, technically Marvel Universe, but it was like future, and not. It was a separate sci-fi story, is really what it was. So in Deathlock Lives, it was drawn by Mike Zack, G.I. Joe fans. This was them saying no, Deathlock's got ties to the MCU. Yeah, not MCU, I guess, but to the Marvel Universe. And it was, he shows up in Captain America's Current Time. I think these issues came out. These were like issues, it was like issues 283, 284, something like that. So I want to say those were probably published in like 83, 82. And they're really, really good. And it's Cap squaring off against Deathlock. And I think it was the Luther Manning version of Deathlock. Recently, they brought Deathlock back in a big way. But they had David Pepos revealed that version of Deathlock is actually Miles Morales from the future. What? Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. Frank Miller's return to Daredevil. John Romero Jr. on pencils. I do remember bringing this with me and reading this at college and going, this is too good for words, man. I think this series got me into collecting Daredevil big time. I don't think I was collecting Daredevil before this. I'm trying to remember when I first would have read like Born Again and all that stuff. And I feel like The Man Without Fear was my entree into Daredevil. Maybe not. Maybe I was into it a little bit. Yeah, I probably was into it before that. But this was really, really good. The Man Without Fear is solid, and it's just a great year one for Daredevil. It holds up to this day. It's really, really well done. What else? Lots of, it's funny, if you look on this page, there's just so much, again, I've talked about this last time, there's so much extremeness on this page. There's lots of neons and jagged logos between the Ghost Riders and the Blazes and the Freaks, because it's now including the Malibu stuff. It's just a lot of extreme covers. And yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about this month. Nothing. I'm not seeing anything else on the Marvel side that really stands out. I mean, DC had that big month of Superman stuff. Maybe they were purposely kind of holding their powder, knowing that those were going to just eclipse everything on the shelf, because it's hard to, you know that stuff's going to be massive. But the X-Men are in the middle of Fatal Attractions. No, that's actually probably it. That's the biggest thing this month is X-Men 25 is the issue where Magneto, I believe this is the one that ends with they're in the plane or helicopter, I forget which one it was, and Magneto grabs Wolverine with his adamantium skeleton and just begins to rip out the skin, and he rips it out. So like it ends with the metal being ripped, and you're a cliffhanger of like, is that even possible? And then Wolverine next, the issue of Wolverine. So I guess, yeah, Wolverine 75 is dealing with, which would be next month, I believe, is dealing with the fallout from that. Let me look at that cover real quick. Yeah, yes, Wolverine 75 is Wolverine in that. He's had half his metal ripped out and he doesn't know what to do and he's going to lose his mind and it's excruciating pain place. So the X-Men issue is the big one. That's actually been going up in back issues a little bit, which is neat. It's a milestone thing. And it's the answer that it's answering the question that people really had been asking since day one. I mean, and to Claremont's credit, from day one, they did show like Wolverine went at Magneto and Magneto was like, are you out of your mind? And he just kind of backed him away, but they never showed that Magneto was strong enough to actually manipulate the metal, just kind of manipulate Wolverine in the metal. So this was a whole new level for him.
You were saying?
Now, we're going to look at movies that were in the theaters of August of 1993. And boy, August 6th, I think I teased this last week, an all-timer. I don't care what you say. This movie's great. It is a, The Fugitive's on? Let's leave it on. I don't care where it is in the movie. The Fugitive. Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones. So they could sell you more Provasic. You know, like, it's fabulous. Plus, if you're a Chicago guy, it's shot in Chicago. It's just all over Chicago. There's a lot there. There are really no waterfalls anywhere near. I don't know, it was a dam, I guess, but there really aren't those either. So I don't know where they shot that, but that part didn't feel, when he jumps off into the water, that didn't feel very Illinois. But man, is The Fugitive great. So that's August 6th. And on the same day, poor Robert Townsend, who's such a talent, but he released The Meteor Man. That's going to be, no one's going to watch that. Everyone's going to see The Fugitive. Come on. So then the next week, on the 11th, Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is a delightful film. But, you know, that's not drawing eyes away from The Fugitive. Now, the following week is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. This feels like a little counter-programming. Isn't this the one that doesn't actually have Jason in it? Is that, you know, where he's like the ghost that inhabits other people? Is that listen, I've seen all of them. I think I own these all digitally. So I've seen them all multiple times. I will never and can never keep track of what happens in each one. I apologize for that. That is not meant as a disrespect. I can't keep track of it outside of, Jason Goes to Manhattan and then Jason X in Space, like those kind of big swings. But the normal Jason movies, I find it really hard to keep track of what happens. So I don't remember if this is a good one or a bad one. But all I know is it truly was not The Final Friday. That's all I know. In August, Hard Target. I think this is the first John Woo. Yeah, this is the first John Woo U.S. movie. They've recently covered this on How Did This Get Made, I think. And it made me want to watch this because I've never seen it. I like John Woo a lot. I liked his Hard Boiled, and what was the other one? Yeah, I watched that stuff in college all the time. It's great. And I like his US stuff too. It's solid. But I'm pretty sure I've never seen Hard Target. And I believe, isn't it the whole like Dangerous Game kind of thing? But that is August 20th. 25th, August 25th is, Mel Gibson's Man Without a Face, the burn victim one. Oof. I have seen it. It's a fine movie. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's another in those long line of movies where Mel Gibson wants to show you how victimized he can make himself. And I like Mel Gibson as an actor. As a human, I've got a lot of issues with him. But setting aside all that stuff, he just has this pattern of all his characters are just these tortured, really physically tortured heroes, you know, and I don't know, it's weird. I don't want to get too much into that. Anyway, it's a J. Joe podcast. And then on the 27th, Needful Things. I saw this recently. It was pretty good. It's not bad. This is about the small town that is visited by the devil, played by Max von Sydow. And he opens up a curio shop, and just one by one, bad things start happening around town, and people start going crazy. It's good. It's a good movie. I do like it. It is a good movie. There's something missing in it that it just doesn't take it over the top. It feels very made for TV, but it is a solidly entertaining movie. I liked it. There was just something about it that just needed a little more oomph to kind of make it a really good Stephen King adaptation. But it is not a bad movie at all. I think Needful Things is probably overlooked a bit.
Now, mass is ready.
Woo, well, it's time, baby. Let's get into it. Snake Eyes and the Transformers, Generation 2, Robots in Disguise. As the cover says, continuing the greatest Joe's action saga of all time. Is this true? Is this the greatest Joe's action saga? I'll tell you what, the cover pops. Now, that's primarily due to the neon pink. Fair enough. You know, when the neon invaded the toys, that's when I bowed out. I get it. I think it works on this cover. I think it makes it pop. I'm glad they don't make a habit of it. Let me look at next month. I don't think next month is really neon. No, next month's a little more normal. It's a Will Rosado cover. And what I really like about this is something that I don't think I really noticed until I sat down to do this podcast, is the back is a silhouette of Megatron holding Dr. Biggles-Jones as if he were going to eat her. Like he's holding up like she's a delicacy for a giant Transformer to eat. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever really noticed that, because the pink on the Night Creeper leader and Snake Eyes just makes that pop so much that you almost don't even notice that. And I think that's good, because there is so much going on this cover, again, with the more, there's a lot of text on it. There's so many blurbs that using Megatron in silhouette with Biggles-Jones and really just making her Dr. Labcoat the only thing that's not a silhouette works really well. It's like that, those decisions they made are really smart. I don't know if originally maybe he did actually draw Megatron and it was, just too much. So they said, let's silhouette it. But, either way, however that decision came about, very smart. And I think it works and it's fun. This comic book looks like a comic book that would be packaged with a toy. And that's fun. I think that's fun. So it's, it's not like super symmetrical. It's not super amazing action, but I think it does the job of getting your eyes on it, and primarily due to that pink.
Yo, Joe!
G.I. Joe. Stan Lee presents. So it's a Millville, USA, the town where Cobra lives. And Megatron is once again he's built up again. He's not, remember at the end of last issue, Cobra Commander told him to turn into a tank so that it would be less conspicuous. And Megatron is ignoring him now. So they're rehashing that conversation here, which is good because that catches us up as readers. That kind of catches us up on, what's happening, because there's always a little bit of lifting when you first start a comic to get people filled in if this is their first book, which I think is great. And Larry gives us the reason why the Cobras are playing nice with them, because they want the Cybertronian technology, etc., and so on. And then in the bottom panel, we see Tunnel Rat, and he's got his binoculars on Megatron, and we see that because it's reflected in his binoculars. So that's a nice way to show that those two panels are connected, because they're seemingly disconnected. There's no real, it's not like you see an open sewer grate in the top panel. There's nothing indicating that they're connected, but through Tunnel Rat's binoculars, you see the figure of Megatron, and that works well enough. Also, the positioning and direction that I believe this is Steve Lieber drawing these pages, that he's drawing Tunnel Rat looking, is putting it in opposition to where Cobra is generally heading. So Cobra is generally facing left in this top panel. Like they're kind of moving left and towards you on the camera. And then he's got Tunnel Rat positioned looking right and kind of towards you, but like to the right. So in other words, it's setting up a counterbalance of composition. If you flip Tunnel Rat the other direction, that implies that he's behind them. This implies that he's in front of them, or that they're heading towards him rather. So does that make sense? So it's a simple trick and a smart choice by, I believe, Steve Lieber.
Yo, Joe!
Sucker Punch. Now this is one of the 2-page spreads that G.I. Joe's been doing for the last few months, really. We've been doing this for a little while, where we start on a small page and then we go to a nice 2-page spread. There's a part of me that starts to think that maybe that's Larry getting out of kind of writing a page less. I don't mean that in any kind of lazy, you know what I mean? But it does save you a page. It does save you a page of kind of writing, because you're really writing for one page, but it just happens to be a big one. And the reason I keep saying I think it's Steve Lieber is because Larry Hama's script, Steve Lieber and Will Rosato are on pencils. Bob Sharon is doing the coloring. Scott Moulter and Chip Wallace are doing the inking. Rick Parker is letters, and Mike Lackey is the editor. And DeFalco is the commander-in-chief. Now, Steve Lieber, I like quite a bit. And he, I believe, got a start in kind of more indie stuff. And at the time, his biggest breakout that I remember ever seeing him in is he did Whiteout, the original Whiteout book with Greg Rucka. That was made into a movie with Kate Beckinsale, where she's stuck in, she's a cop up in Alaska or North Pole, even. I think it was North Pole, but it's good. It was acclaimed, and then the movie was okay. It wasn't terrible, but Lieber really he's got a real indie vibe to him, and more recently he's really hit his stride, man. He did the Jimmy Olsen series for DC, which if you didn't read it, you missed out. This goes back maybe 4 years. I feel like it's 2017, 2018. It's Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. Oh, 2020. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, Who Killed Jimmy Olsen, is fabulous. It is a wonderful, wonderful story, and the art is gorgeous, and Lieber really, really kills it. He also worked on the One Star Squadron. That was more recently in this year, which was great. Back in 2014, he did Superior Foes of Spider-Man. So he's been working steadily, apparently, since 1993. But he's got this, I see in his work, this real indie vibe, right? It's this little bit of Crumb level frankness to his characters, right? That it's not interested in exaggerated physiques. He's more interested in, if you, for example, look on this splash page, look at Airtight. That's a dude in an airtight suit. That is not a action figure. It's not a superhero. That is a dude wearing an airtight suit, right? Roadblock, now his face is just gruesome. I would say this, it's a gruesome looking Roadblock, but it's more, it's a dude in a shirt, the same thing with Rock. I mean, that's really what they are. Tunnel Rat is the most action oriented here. It looks, from what I can see, Lieber actually studied the Kubert school. So I can see a little Kubert influence in this as well. So that's what I'm seeing. And his figures are bigger and they're bolder and they're more, we're going to get to that on the next page. So, there's a really good example of this vibe I'm talking about, but this one is those guys shooting at these eels that are in the sewer system. So they've come under fire.
Yo, Joe!
And Will Rosato, who we're going to talk about a little more when we get to his art, which is the next page. I was a big fan of his stuff too in the 90s. From what I could see online, he says he splits his time between working on marketing, like what do you call story, like he does a lot of storyboards and Madison Avenue stuff, advertising. That's the word I'm trying to think of. But I've really enjoyed his stuff since his Connor Hawk years. He did the Connor Hawk stuff when Green Arrow was replaced, which would have been like 94. I mean, it wasn't that long after Death of Superman that they killed off Green Arrow. And they replaced him with Connor Hawk, which is a very underrated sequence of issues. It's like, I think it's 40 some issues. Connor Hawk stuff is really, really great. But he did a run on Teen Titans. He did a run on G.I. Joe. He worked on Birds of Prey, Nightwing. If you're not familiar with Will Rosato's stuff, it's really clean. It's really efficient. And this is his early stuff. But I remember being a real fan right when I first saw his Green Arrow stuff and loving the way that he really first, like just the way that he delineated Green Arrow at the time, like just being a fan of the simplicity that he brought to the page of that. I really, really liked it. So Will Rosato's the other artist on this, but we're still on Steve Lieber here. And this page is a great example of this kind of indie sensibility where there's not a lot of panel to panel progression for keeping us in space, but it's the juxtaposition of the images that we're seeing. Does that make sense? So he puts as much detail into the panel as possible, which is great. So we were airtight. He's kind of chewed up, and you could see in the background all the other eels fighting the Joes. And then we cut to Cobra Commander, and everyone looks a little frumpy. Everyone looks a little more real, a little more human, not as muscled. And then this picture of Cobra Commander, the way his hands, they're not gloved, they're ungloved, and he's kind of like, they're framing his eye, and he's like reaching for something out there. And it's just this angsty, you want to, like if this were a full panel picture, you would pull it out and you would turn it into a pop art. Who's the artist who stole all that stuff from Russ Heath? Roy Lichtenstein. That's who. He stole all the Russ Heath paintings and made $1 billion, and Russ Heath didn't get it. But think of like a Roy, like this image here, like where this Cobra Commander, like a full blown kind of like hand angsty in the air saying something angsty. You could see that being a Lichtenstein kind of pop art piece. Like that's the vibe I get from Lieber's stuff. His stuff now versus then is really different. His stuff now is a lot cleaner. It's a little more traditional. It's a little more, it's just cleaner, I would say. And I think he's improved his storytelling. And like I said, Jimmy Olsen is great if you've never read it, but that's the cool vibe I'm getting from this. And I'm really enjoying that because that's not a vibe that we get a lot in G.I. Joe. Yo, Joe! So now, we've got Megatron is going to get, he's going to go to the Ark and he needs to get Dr. Biggles-Jones, and he's going to pack her in liquid hydrogen for the trip to Cybertron. So she does not have a good future in front of her. I'm not sure if this is Rosato or if this is Lieber, to be honest. I think this actually is Lieber. And I think it is because of Biggles-Jones's face. But I could also see some Rosato in her face too. So it might be because also inkers matter here too as well, right? So inkers matter a lot when you're talking about the finished product. So I gotta be honest. I'm not sure who did this page. I have a feeling it was Lieber, but well, it ends with Biggles-Jones confronting Scarlet in the hospital. Remember last issue, she said, "I know you're a double agent," and Snake Eyes was about to gat her. And so all the ninjas are waiting outside to wait to see how it plays out inside because they're not exactly sure.
Yo, Joe!
But now this page, I definitely know is Rosado. And because there's the lines are cleaner, everything is you could just see the shift in art. This is the Rosado that would definitely go on to do Green Arrow in a couple of years, for sure. So while the ninjas are outside, they get attacked by the Night Creepers, and it's on. And I like this. I like the colors here. There's not a lot of detail on the buildings, which is great because then that makes this just kind of a color palette explosion, right? There's not a lot of heavy inks on the characters either, so it's just a lot of covers. And if you look at like the way he deals with Storm Shadow, they inked him real heavy, so he pops out against is that Budo or Slicer? I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly who's who on the Ninja Force, but that picture of Storm Shadow has just got this great thick heavy black line all around him, so it really makes him pop against what would normally be like kind of a cluttered image.
Yo, Joe!
And it's more Rosado on this page as well, and we've got Hawk filling us in that Tunnel Rat and his team need some help from the ninjas, but the ninjas are like, yeah, we're also in trouble too. I love the way Storm Shadow is drawn here, in that he's got it's the camouflage outfit, but there's the shoulder guards, and they're just big and bulky. But he moves so smooth in them, and like it's a good look. The way he draws Storm. Again, I don't like this Snake Eyes. He looks like a serial killer or a toy, but he looks less like a toy here than when Wildman was drawing him. But we are now visited by the what they call the upper management of the Night Creepers. Because remember, the Night Creepers were accountants / ninjas. If that's a career path that you want to follow. So the leader of the Night Creepers shows up, and this is where I get a little weird for me. He says, they only left one to battle me. This is the leader of the Night Creepers saying it. He says, you had better be a master ninja or this will be a short work. He's talking to Snake Eyes. I don't know how anyone associated with Cobra doesn't know who Snake Eyes is at this point in time.
Yo, Joe!
Also, anyone in the ninja community doesn't know who Snake Eyes is at this point in time. So Snake Eyes and he start a fight, and he's doing a lot of that narrative discussion of like, I blocked you, I blocked your sword. That happens very often in sword fights because it's a static medium, so you really want to make sure we understand what's going on. In this case, Snake Eyes swings his swords, he blocks it with his crossbow, the Ninja Master does. And he shoots multiple bolts at Snake Eyes, and Snake Eyes, in a real cool image, like thwaps his sword and blocks them all out of the air, which is pretty neat. That's a cool drawing. Again, I like the use of sparse backgrounds here because it's highlighting. It's just making the color to kind of tell a lot of this story. It's neat. It's really well done. And the Night Creeper, they're not going to go sword to sword because that apparently, according to him, is where a true Ninja Master gets tested.
Yo, Joe!
So now we are back to Lieber. And Scarlet is defending herself, but she's also reaching for the button to call for help because she thinks Biggles-Jones is going to kill her. She's defending herself as being loyal to Cobra, right? But Biggles-Jones is like, no, you got to shut up and hear me out. I got something to say to you. But this whole time, a naked, wet Dr. Mindbender is on the other side of the door with a cup listening. And this is that Steve Lieber style indie kind of cartoonish vibe that I'm talking about, where it cuts. We've never met Mindbender before, like, in this issue, like we don't, like we weren't recapped that Mindbender's in the other page. It just cuts to a naked wet man with his ear listening to to the other room of two women fighting like a cat fight. Like and he's got a look of bedevilment on his face. These are all conscious choices, and I love it. I think it works really well. And then the camera pulls back to show that Slice and Dice are there. Mindbender's wrapped in his towel, because remember, he has to stay in the ice bath in order to keep his metabolism down, because he is a freshly cloned individual. And he tells them to stick around because he may need their help sometime soon.
Yo, Joe!
So now Cobra Commander sends every Viper and every eel that he can into the sewers to go after the Joes down there. And this is where Zarana starts to question their alliance with Megatron. She says, what did Megatron mean by that remark about freezing Biggles-Jones in liquid hydrogen? And then I don't know if Megatron's talking to them, or I don't know who he's like, because Megatron's on the ark far away, and she's saying it closer to the camera. But then we do get a response from Megatron, and he says, I don't bother freezing the entire organism, just the brain and central nervous system. The protoplasm stripper is just the thing for hacking away all that excess tissue. And he's holding this giant, looks like a Swiss Army knife contraption that's going to rip out Biggles-Jones's brain and save it. That's a cool reveal. There's a fun smirk on Megatron. Yeah, this is a fun little page, and this is the moment of the story where, you know,
Yo, Joe!
the worm turns, right? Like you can't trust the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but you can't trust Megatron because he's always going to turn on you. And you remember, somewhere in space, the Autobots, they got a distress call, so they're not in this issue, but they're somewhere out there. So they're on their way back to Earth. So I don't know, maybe next issue they'll show up. So down in the sewer, fun stuff. Cobra, the eels are once again caught up to the Joe crew that's walking. They're actually trapped, and this final panel by Lieber of Tunnel Rat, where his the flash from his gun is illuminating him. This is really old school war comic, right? This is that close up look that, again, I associate with kind of an indie feel. Like the camera's a little too close to him. You see a little too much. Like his face looks like a man possessed. This feels like an old war comic, something from the he would have certainly learned at the Kubert School. And you don't, and with kind of this the color palette being a washed out, simplified palette, you don't see that a lot. You wouldn't like in. I feel like a Wildman one the camera would have been back about 5 feet, would have seen more of his body, would have seen more of the gun firing and stuff. This is just all it's representing that there's a gun firing. We know there's a gun firing, but it's more about the effect on the human of the gun instead of seeing the actual gun itself, if that makes sense. I think that's what we're getting here out of Lieber, and I think it's much more powerful. This panel's awesome. Again, another Lichtenstein-esque. You could have ripped this one off as well.
Yo, Joe!
And now we back to Rosado, who he's certainly showing his chops for what would be his run in Green Arrow, which was focused more on martial arts than it was archery. And he's just drawing some really smooth lines, very nice figure work of these two combatants. They're going at it, the Snake Eyes and the Night Creeper Master. I think that's really all he ever calls himself. I don't think he ever got a name other than that. He's also wearing a blindfold over his head, so he's like fighting blind, I believe. It looks like it's blind, doesn't see their eyes. But he boasts, he studied the 2,000 forms of the ancient masters. He's devised reciprocating defensive techniques for all of them. There's no form of technique, strategy, or ruse, or feint that he cannot defeat. And Snake Eyes seems to be at a disadvantage.
Yo, Joe!
I do like that both ninjas are just rolling around with grenades on their fronts of their shirts. That really seems counterproductive to being a ninja. So now we're back to a Lieber page of the guys in the tunnel, and now we've got some bats. So this is where you go, oh, these bats they're drawn more human than they are robotic. Like, because they look more like humanoid blobs than they do like robots. So this is again where it falls into more of a humanistic pencil than it is let's draw robots, robot walking creatures. Like, these just look like blobby dudes in white outfits than hard-shelled robots kind of a thing. So they're attacking him, and everyone's, and I'll tell you, every time we see Roadblock, he looks weirder and weirder, but I like it. Like, I kind of like it. It just gives a lot of, I think it's just adding a lot of energy. I think that J. Joe hasn't seen in a while.
Yo, Joe!
Now we've got Biggles-Jones and Scarlet, and she says, Biggles-Jones says, and that's the whole truth. And Scarlet says, incredible, then you're really, and she can't finish the sentence for us, when Megatron's hand just rips through the wall and takes Biggles-Jones. Now remember, she's taking her because she developed that railgun technology that is now part of his tank form, and he wants to use it on Cybertron with all of his soldiers. So Mindbender sees this, and he says, Slice and Dice, you'd better go next door and take Scarlet into custody. Biggles-Jones has already had her chickens come home to roost. So the implication here being in that Biggles-Jones is a double agent as well. Mindbender knows it, but Mindbender also has this look of pure fear because he knows they're dealing with Megatron is something that they're not going to be able to stop if Megatron turns against them.
Yo, Joe!
So now back on the rooftop, in a Rosado page, Snake Eyes drops his swords, and this Ninja Master, again, I can't believe you don't know who Snake Eyes is. He says, the Silent One disarms himself completely. Is this submission? Is this acceptance of defeat? And he says, no, it's a secret form. And Snake Eyes basically takes off all of his weaponry and turns his back to him, and he starts going into the Arashikage mindset. And the narrator of the piece, who is the Night Creeper, says, a form so arcane and shrouded in mystery, most practitioners regard it as a rumor. Could it be that this silent ninja is privy to the secret of the Arashikage mindset? Or is this a bluff? So he doesn't know, and he's sweating it. He's truly torn. Because if it's a bluff, then he doesn't know how to counter it. But if it's real, he also doesn't know how to counter it because he doesn't know what he doesn't, it's such a secret form, even though we've seen it used 18 times in the comic.
Yo, Joe!
Now back to the hospital. When Slice and Dice get inside, Scarlet has made her way out of the room, or has she? She's actually hiding under the bed. So she trips them up and beats on them. And this is in a fun, like, kind of just a fun, quick panel set way. Like, this feels very, this is very comic strippy, of its panel of Scarlet, tripping them, bopping them over the head, escaping, and making her way out.
Yo, Joe!
So back on the roof, the Night Creeper leader is he's working through his options here. He says, if this fellow truly was an Arashikage master, would he need to resort to the mindset to defeat him? Of course not. So therefore he thinks he's a trickster. So when he goes to Snake Eyes actually just ducks, which throws him off his footing.
Yo, Joe!
And we actually there's really no payoff to it's not like he tripped and fell off the roof. That's what I was waiting for. It cuts back to Scarlet in the hospital. But that page was interesting though, because that was the classic, I know you're lying, but do you know that I know you're lying page? Like, what do you call it? From Princess Bride. Oh, dogs are going nuts. From Princess Bride, when it's like, you know that I put the poison in the flask, but I know that you know. So Scarlet's making her way out, and in a awesome bit of moments of just people being humans, and just because you're a viper doesn't mean you ain't human. Guy says there's two vipers chilling, and they goes, hey man, snack food, don't hide it, divide it. Oh, now I only get half the sugar rush. And they're just chilling. And they get confronted by Scarlet, and she just goes ham on him, really. She takes him out with her sword. They're alley vipers, a couple of alley vipers. I believe that's V2 alley viper. And they do get warned by Mindbender, but it's to no avail. And Scarlet sees the Ark take off, presumably with Biggles-Jones.
Yo, Joe!
So back on the roof, we see that from Snake Eyes jumps back to his feet. And this is, again, there's some nice martial arts drawing on this page of following the form and following the motion. Rosado, I think, does a really nice job with this page, especially this final, like the lower left panel. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's kind of like 4 sequence figures. It's fun. It's fun, and it jives with the attitude and the just the style that Lieber was bringing to the other pages. And when it's all done, Snake Eyes wins, and he puts all of his gear back on in kind of a awesome moment.
Yo, Joe!
So now all the Joes are back together, but they know they're not out of the woods yet. So Hawk just found out that the big muckety-mucks have finally seen fit to let us in on the fact that another American security agency has a double agent planted inside Cobra. So that's who Biggles-Jones is. So we don't exactly know who they are yet. It's the CIA, is it, whatever. We don't know. But Storm Shadow reveals that they left Snake Eyes back there to cover their retrieval. So they got to go back and get him. But Hawk can't send everybody. And so Storm Shadow and Spirit, they're going to be the ones to go. And this appears to be a Lieber page as well. So he says, you guys go back, get our boys, keep a low profile, and come back alive.
Yo, Joe!
However, Snake Eyes, in his pursuit of Scarlet, is caught unawares by all the Cobras, ninjas, vipers, everybody. They outnumber him, and so Snake Eyes is going to get captured here. 100 Cobra troopers covering every escape route. Not even a ninja master could get past them. And Scarlet had escaped already, right? So Snake Eyes is in a bit of a pickle.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, Zorana points out that Megatron is going to gouge her brain out, Biggles-Jones, right in front of us. And the Cobra Commander doesn't care. But Megatron is told to put her down by a katana or sword or just sword wielding Scarlet. I don't know how that's a threat, but Scarlet, what's cool about this is Scarlet is not going to go down without a fight. So she's not going to let this, she apparently just learned that Biggles-Jones is also working for the U.S. government in some capacity. So she's not going to let it go. So she's squaring off against Megatron, and she is the size of his toe, literally. So it promises next issue, the amazing conclusion. So hopefully that means we get some Autobots show up. I'm looking at the cover for next issue. It looks awesome. Oh, there's an aerial bot in the background, so I think we're getting some aerial bot action. So it's awesome. I can't wait to find out what happens. This has been a lot of fun, guys. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I do, because I'm really enjoying this Transformers G.I. Joe crossover. It's working on every level for me. I love the art. I love the storytelling. I love the pacing. I love the action. I love the twists and the turns. It works really well. So hope you're enjoying it as much as I do. Hope you enjoy the show. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.